Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited for an interview today with my friend Jared. He and I came in contact with each other through Instagram recently. I loved his content. He's a massive guy who's doing some hard stuff and finding great success, which I love it when veterans put themselves out there and set the example of fitness and warrior spirit that continues. And so I want to introduce this global audience today to Jared. Jared, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I am from Northern Michigan, hail from Traverse City area, Sleeping Bear National Dunes, Lakeshore. So that's where the jiu-jitsu, Sleeping Bear Jiu-Jitsu sort of originates from. I grew up wrestling, so wrestling was kind of like my base core martial art that got me in and through everything that I've ever done. And so wrestling brought me through my childhood, all the way through high school, into college, and then I joined the Marine Corps shortly after college. And when I joined the Marine Corps, I was fortunate enough and must have been ambitious enough. I found my way onto the All-Marine Wrestling team. And so along that time, I started doing some MMA after college, and I started to learn jiu-jitsu. And so jiu-jitsu became really my main sport. It was kind of like the thing that I could see as being a way to get paid, a way to get exposure, a way to build a platform, that kind of thing. And so I've got my purple belt since under Fredson Pichau, former UFC fighter, former world champion. Just kind of found my way through and found the right people to guide me along on my jiu-jitsu journey. And so hopefully I'm forever a purple belt. That's kind of like my goal, is just to stay a purple belt, just start destroying everybody from purple belt. And so, I've kind of, since leaving the military, since separating or my contract ended, since separating in 2023, I'm kind of gone all out on jiu-jitsu, and that had to do with a few different things. I got a divorce from my wife and ex-wife, and we had been together for 13 years, and so that was a big change in my life. It was a big redirect, a big shift. And jiu-jitsu, having like jiu-jitsu doing so, that foundation really kept me in a focus mode that I needed to sort of like grind through that. And as I was healing, as I was doing all the inner work to kind of deal with those things, jiu-jitsu and my friends and the community that I made and all along that journey sort of like really kind of kept me built up during that time. So a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Jared. And you mentioned divorce, and I've had several folks on this channel whose main current trauma is really divorce, because they go through a lot of the same cycles as someone grieving from death, and especially when it comes to remorse, regret. It becomes a big challenge, and I'm so glad, Jared, to hear that you have had a support network around you, and hopefully people you trust you can talk to and help build you back up and get you back on a path where you can have healthy relationships moving forward.
Yeah, man, thank you so much. And it really is true. The thing that I've noticed most since I started going through my divorce, and since I started owning it and taking responsibility for it and started to look at it, heal it, and really ultimately try to learn how to love this human being that I was with for so long in a new way, like in the way that it is meant to develop into. And all of that's been really hard. You got to look at yourself, you got to look at your past, you got to look at all these things, these tendencies, on a daily basis, because different things come up at different times. Our world, our lives, they're in cycles, so different things come up at different times. But I've noticed with men and how I relate to men through my jiu-jitsu community, through my veterans community, and now my plant medicine community, which we can get into. It really does center around, like, for men, for alpha males, for people who are men in the world. It has to do with that core sort of relationship to the feminine, to the woman, to like, how do we relate ourselves, to this human, this type of human that plays such a large role in our development, in our lives, and there is so much grief associated with these separations, these divorces, and it can be breaking up with a girlfriend. You know,
True.
you call her your girlfriend, and that's the title or whatever, but it's like you were so deep in with them that it felt like you were one person. You know, and so when that gets ripped apart, which I've gone through another cycle of this recently, it's like you do have to grieve it. Like you actually do have to go through the grieving process. And I'm not a stranger to the grieving process. I've lost a brother, and I've lost family members. I've watched people that I know, deal with people who commit suicide. It's just such a real thing, it's such a process. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jared, I appreciate you being vulnerable for us today. And if I could ask another question into that realm, which is, for people who are struggling currently in their relationships and just feel so disconnected from the person that they committed to, what advice could you give them today that they could work on so that they don't have to end in divorce and can make what their initial dreams and goals and visions with that other person come true still?
Yeah, listen, if you're still in a spot where, you can, really, you're still in that relationship, I would say it's probably not even any different than the position I'm in, where I'm, single and, looking at things. The things that are coming up for me is I'm looking at my past. I'm looking at the things coming up, and it's all to sort of recultivate this sort of romance with life. Maybe it's like a love for the simple things, a love for just sort of like reconnecting to your passions, right? So one thing I could say about women is, in some ways, they can symbolize something that's sort of an addiction for you, and it's just, and that's kind of like on you to look at and figure out how that plays out. But for me, in some ways I kind of get addicted to that feeling of like feeling like I'm understood and I know, and there's this love and this all that stuff. But an addiction, like Gabriel Mate says, it's like it's really just symbolizes a disconnection from self. So somewhere you're disconnected from the love that's in you, because it's not like they're giving you love. It's like you are emanating love by being with them. So it's like it actually comes from you. So yeah, I would just kind of like redirect your focus to individuating, like becoming an individual outside of your relationship. So that you can bring yourself whole to that person.
Yeah, brother, that's perfect. And I love the phrase you said, which was to recultivate the romance for life and for your passions. And if I talk on that point real quick, that is such an important principle of healing, in a healing journey, is to rediscover self, rediscover relationships with yourself and with God. And that relationship with yourself, with God, then once it's solidified, becomes an outlet where you can then share that love with other people that are parallel with you in life. And it becomes such a healing journey. And you mentioned addiction, and maybe we mentioned it briefly in our conversation on the phone, but when we talk about serving in the military and the stresses, porn is a big part of deployments for a lot of people. It was everywhere. Everybody had access to it. And porn is one of the biggest killers of love. It promotes lust instead of love. And there is so much healing that can take place when we improve that relationship with God, with ourselves, that removes that lust from our lives and creates a whole new person to move forward and experience the joys and the passions, like you said, out there. And I love the principle that change is possible. There's not one person who's listening today who in their own mind might feel stuck and feel like there's no hope. I don't believe that's true. I believe there's always hope to move forward and move up that line and progress. So thank you for sharing that vision today, because it emanates truth. It really does.
Yeah, but if you don't mind, I'll touch on the porn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a killer for sure. It's also just the culture we live in, right? So we can just kind of like take a bird's eye view and say, like, there's no reason to judge anybody. There's and the hardest judges, people listen to this, is going to be yourself. And that was me for a long time. It's like, okay, I chose to fight against this thing. It's like I chose to go to war with it, right? Instead of maybe just like looking at it, observing, where that desire comes from. And I think what I've learned now, like as I get more into my spiritual practices, it's the danger really comes when you engage it in a way where you exhaust that life force energy onto something that's it's like pre-ejaculating. It's like you're not actually getting fully into the act of sex because you just kind of like throw it out there, and then you gave it away.
Yep.
And you kind of like spoiled it, instead of sitting with it, breathing, meditating with it, letting it go down, letting it get up in your head, letting it go down. Because it's going to get stuck in your head and you're going to overthink it and judge yourself and all that stuff, or it's going to go out the bottom end, and you're going to lose all of your life force energy that way. And so it's more of a practice of like sitting with and not judging the porn, or not judging the lust or anything like that. It's like more asking the question, like, why? Why does this exist? And then as you get more in tune with that, I think putting that into your life, that energy that you're cultivating, putting like your give a, can I swear?
Yeah.
It's like your give a fuck of life, It's like, that is your fuck. And it's like, put that into your passions, put that into what you care about, put that into your community, put that into your wife, put that into yourself, instead of wasting it away, or just working against yourself.
Yeah, I like what you said, and if I pick up on that a little more, and we talk about guilt and shame, guilt is that feeling that reminds us that we have some work to do. Shame, on the other hand, is that emotion that degrades us, demeans us, and also increases the likelihood that we'll continue to struggle with bad coping mechanisms. And so I like to say, get rid of shame. Get it out of your body, get it out of your mind. It's got no place in a person who's progressing in their wellness journey. Guilt can be good, and it can also be bad. So if we always look at those vices that are negative coping mechanisms and always struggle with that guilt, it eventually will turn to shame, and it prevents us from progressing. And I love the fact that you mentioned that, because it's not helpful for us to beat ourselves up and stay in this tug of war, really, because anybody who's ever done a tug of war knows that eventually your grip starts to weaken and you give in. And if it's a tug of war, we will always lose the battle in the long run. If we change the mindset and we look at it as a way of progressing and recognizing our feelings, where the roots come from, then that progression and that healing really begins. So true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that was the shame, the emotion of shame, and guilt. Just, it was just so heavy in my marriage. And it really, honestly, you compare all day long, but it's, it's like I was in the fight. Like I wasn't, I was in the fight, and most guys are. I think most guys with any sense of morality, any sense of family, any sense of good in the, it's like you're gonna fight it. But it's kind of counterintuitive if you just kind of like take a step back and accept it, open up. That's where the vulnerability comes in. That's where like opening up to your friends, and then like, as you do that work, maybe pouring that energy that you're starting to build up, into those relationships and like the harder conversations. Because it's just now, like, it's funny. I've been divorced now for over a year. And I still have a relationship with my ex, and it's very wholesome. We had a very peaceful split, and there's still healing occurring. We're still able to talk about some of the stuff where it's like, you just didn't know at that time. The perspectives were different. It's like, maybe at that time I wouldn't have been able to hold it or handle it, but now we can. Now we can revisit it, talk about it, and it's like there's all sorts of different types of healing, but it is like combating that shame and guilt, forgiving yourself. Moving forward in that. Sure.
Yeah. And Jared, you also mentioned some pretty sad stuff and losing your brother. Do you mind sharing that experience?
Not at all. Yeah, no, it's a huge part of my journey. My brother overdosed. He was kind of part of that like pill sort of fentanyl time, where it was like pretty easy to get your hands on it. Like growing up, me and him, he was 3 years older than me, so he was an older brother. Growing up, it was pretty easy to get our hands on, pills for, we're athletes, so it's like broken hand, Vicodin. Grandma has 10 prescriptions of Percocet, like Oxycontin, because the medical system hooked her on 50 different prescriptions, and it's just like really what that did when my brother passed away and got a bad, so it's kind of a mix of things. He had a bad batch of drugs, most of the drugs take out, kind of gives me that edge against like our medical industrial system that really messes up veterans, that really messes up a lot of humans. And then the second part was he got cheated on. And so sort of like that mix of guys who just get their hearts broken because they become too vulnerable, they become too dependent on a woman. And then, that dependency and addiction to, those physical, chemical, sort of dopamine, addiction. So, and that's kind of formed. And I think like life's happening for me, and like looking at all this stuff. And obviously, it was a very hard time period for me, and a lot of things happening all at once. But looking back now, it's like I have the best brothers in my life. Like I have just from the wrestling team at Wheaton, just growing up, from the Marine Corps, from jiu-jitsu, I'm living with my brother's best friend from high school now, so it's like, we're actually going up the California coast right now, in a van, so it's just like life, like, what is it? You do the work and you just kind of see the good in it all. And it's like, yeah, okay, there's meaning, you just got to kind of look at it. You got to kind of like see. So, my brother was a cool human. He was an artist and wrestled and played guitar and, just did all these things. But just at the time that it got real intense, he didn't, have the coping mechanisms. He didn't know how to reach out. He didn't know how to say, I needed help. I need help. Because he had a lot of friends who love him to death, and they would have been there for him for sure. But yeah.
And that's the sad part of the suicides that we've experienced with friends. It's the sad side of drug overdoses. We often are not raised to know how to cope with extreme trauma, difficulties, and I've been there mentally before, and very, very dark road. And few things pulled me out, including friends, including my spouse, including God. And thank goodness all of those three things came together at the same time and backed me away from that edge. Because it's scary to think the alternative. And I have so much compassion for people who have taken their lives, including my best friend, who was in the Army with me in civil affairs. And it's a hard thing, but I have so much compassion for those people, and also for the family members that are left behind, because and if I have that compassion, I know God also has that compassion and mercy for them as well. And I hope for good things to come in the next life for them, and more for us in this life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. It's so difficult.
It is, and unfortunately, there are going to be people on this channel listening today who are in that dark place.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'd like to say is like, the first thing is like, okay, well, you're not alone. It's fair.
True.
It's true. There are other people that are dealing with that, but it's not always easy to get in front of the right people, right?
Right.
But what I would say, when you look at your life and you're just like, trying to see how life is happening for you. Like, why is this happening? Why do I feel like this? And how is this supposed to be meaningful? Well, to take a look at your life like it's, maybe the hero's journey. So if you look at like Joseph Campbell's like the hero's journey, I've been really interested in depth psychology, Carl Jung, Jungian psychology. A lot of that's come up from my ceremonies doing ayahuasca and my time with psilocybin mushrooms, and just as I work with these plants and I start to like see themes and things start to stick out more as symbols, it's like, I think because as humans we're actually telling a myth. There's a story being told with our life, and the more you can kind of tell yourself that, and I think you'll start to see it, and then it's a story is being told with my life. What myth is being played out? What character am I playing at this time, or like what characters are in my life that would represent what's going on or whatever. And that dark night of the soul, that those dark moments where you're really at rock bottom, like many heroes, if not all of them, have been in that place. And some of the people I look up to most, I know that they've felt like killing themselves. They've had those thoughts where it is like, this would just kind of, this would do it. So it's just one of those things to hold on to. It's like the meaning is there. It's to be discovered.
Yeah, and I would say that if anyone listening today on the channel has any thought of somebody, as we've been discussing these things, and said, I wonder how that person's doing, don't hesitate. Reach out, and don't just do it on text. Give them a call. You never know if you can be that guardian angel for somebody who's at that line, and help them walk backwards and see the hope that exists. One thing, Jared, that impresses me is your tenacity to stay with a sport that you loved growing up, that probably gave you direction, discipline, etc., and continue that journey today. Talk to me about how jiu-jitsu and training and fitness, nutrition, etc., have impacted your wellness journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So we talk about nutrition. We talk about like what you put into your body is a little bit of what you get out, and a lot of times it is your mental clarity, it is how you look, how you feel, all that stuff on the physical realm. It matters. It matters. And I learned that young when I was cutting a lot of weight. When I was trying to not just cut weight, but cutting weight's one way to learn how your body like responds to certain things. But just to be fit, just to be athletic, so that I can compete at my best, right? And so like always looking for that edge, always looking for the nutrition deficiencies, or just, always looking for, and there's a little bit of like game you got to play, chasing, health or whatever, versus just like, just being content and kind of in that. But I learned a lot about, organic foods and, cooking my foods. I stopped going out to eat when I was in high school. I wouldn't go to McDonald's, after like my junior year of high school. It was like, no way, like not putting that stuff in my body. And so like, typically, as those habits like kind of build up, it's like you don't even want those things after a certain amount of time. Like I haven't had soda, since I was in high school. It's just like, sugar. And then you learn, as you get into like the culture and how messed up the culture is and stuff, you learn that like the oils that we cook with, canola oil, seed oils, all this stuff's trash. It just ruins your endocrine system, and then sugar is literally has this like cane or high fructose corn syrup, like sugar, all that stuff. It has the same effect on your brain as cocaine. It's like, I don't know if you've ever tried cocaine, but yeah, it's just, I'm just saying, like you take those things into consideration. It's a little more like it's a little more serious. It's you can't be so lackadaisical about the things that you put into your body. And because I think I made those commitments at a young age, and I carried over into the Marine Corps. I mean, I was the guy in the Marine Corps that was like often I wouldn't touch MREs. Like I did at times, had to, because I would starve, and also it's just part of the experience.
Yeah.
But I felt like I felt like a complete feral animal anytime I'd eat one. It's like you just become the laundry list of ingredients on the MRE that you can't pronounce. Just like So I think I'm still detoxing some of that stuff. But I would be the guy that's bringing out sustainable organic stuff and dried fruit, and I just get made fun of all the time. I'm like, screw you guys.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned MREs. I remember in Ranger School in Mountain Phase, we hadn't eaten in 24 hours, and we had just been rucking up and down with a 100-pound pack, just going up and down the mountains of Georgia. And they stopped us, and they're like, all right, you've got 10 minutes to eat. And I would pound 2 MREs, which is about 8,000 calories, 10,000 calories, somewhere in there from those things. And I wouldn't eat again for the next 24 hours. But it really is like a poison. It's just gross to even consider it,
Yeah, I know. I couldn't go back. It would be one way to really, if you wanted to clean up the military a little bit, we could maybe do a little better than Sodexo, which is the catering company that the DoD contracts with. It's like on base, and that food is barely edible. It's not nutritious at all. And then like the PXs or anything, it's just that's where Marines get addicted to nicotine and caffeine, energy drinks and Ribbits and Bangs and all this stuff. It's just wild to me. It's just a really artificial environment for food. But I don't know, maybe it's just cheap or something. But as far as jiu-jitsu goes, and I've been committed to that journey, committed to getting on the wrestling team. So I just, in the military, I just made better choices than most people. I packed my own lunches,
That's impressive. That's hard to do. That's called deliberate.
Yeah.
Deliberate.
It pays off. Yeah, that kind of thing pays off, right? Like that. And that's like the base foundation. Cause it's if you don't take care of your body, it's like you're not going to feel like training more often. It's like, yeah, I don't always feel like I want to train, but often I can prime myself enough physically and then mentally to want to and be excited to train. It's like the things that you're passionate about don't have to be a chore, necessarily. So
yeah,
I've just kind of learned how to love training and have fun training. And the more tournaments I go to, bigger my network grows, the more people I have to stay with or, work with or train with or, whatever. So it's just kind of brought me all over the world now at this point. My wrestling training partner from the Marine Corps and his fight manager invited me over to Abu Dhabi this time last year. So I was in Abu Dhabi, training and coaching some of the best guys in the world. And I was just starting to feel a little bit like a dream, but it is kind of a dream, I guess, So,
well, you've worked for it for a long time. I mean,
yeah, it's been a lot of years of, wrestling gets no glory. There's, there is you can win, you can win state titles and you can all that stuff, but most people, don't, but it's just it's a lot of work for very little recognition. And yeah, there was always more than that. My dad got me into wrestling because he was in wrestling. He just got me around really strong men that I looked up to,
awesome.
And knew that he couldn't provide everything for me. So kudos to him for being humble in that way. And yeah, I'm eternally grateful for him, getting me into that. And I just started to love it at some point. And it really turned me around when I was in high school. So I was going down the same route as my brother. I was hooked on pills by the time I was 14. Just, not really any fault total fault of my parents. Like maybe there was some awareness stuff there, but but we were prescribed this stuff, and then I would find it, my friends would give it to me or whatever. And with a pretty hard hook on it for a little while. And then when I started having some success in wrestling, my freshman year of high school, I made it to the state finals, and kind of realized I had a route in this, I had a path in this, and I was kind of getting sick of people I was hanging around with. I was kind of getting sick of, I just thought there was better, there's more. I kept feeling like there's more, there's something better for me. And so I made a hard turn. I actually got caught shoplifting, and my dad actually extended me a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness. I thought he was going to beat me up, I thought he was going to kind of get after me, and he didn't. And at that time I made a pretty hard switch, to developing my own relationship with God, and then I was just kind of got clean from everything, changed my friend group. So that was kind of like the first initial little awakening, period. So yeah.
Jared, tell me why go into the military?
Well, when I graduated college, I got married, and I was not ready to get married. I was just in a lot of ways, I was just a boy. I was just not ready. Emotionally, I think, physically I was there. In some ways I was there. I was willing, I loved her, so it wasn't like that. But, she made really good money right out of college. She went to Ross Business School in Michigan, and so got out of school and was making really good money. And I was like, yeah, I'll get into the military. But it took me 2 years to get into the military after college because I tore my pec and I had to get waivers and all this stuff. And so I was kind of feeling like a schlub, I was not bringing in any really good income. I didn't have a plan, and good for her for, sticking by my side. But her energy was so masculine. Her energy was so, she's providing, she's, it's just this is backwards. I just shouldn't have gotten into this. I need to do my, really looking back, I should have had myself first. I never really just had myself. I was so focused on wrestling, in college, school took a back seat. I just didn't, really develop a full, being good on my own type thing. So when I started to really feel that, I was I know there's more for me. I started getting into MMA, and then I found the Marine Corps wrestling team was a thing. And I was doing anything and everything I could to get into. I was going to enlist. I was trying to get an 18 X-ray contract with the Army.
Yep.
To go Green Beret. I was trying to go into SEALs. I was what's my fastest route to MARSOC? I was looking at every option. I literally had everything, I knew every single step of every single program. And because of my pec tear, nobody was letting me enlist. That was crazy. And then finally I found an OSO through the Marine Corps, an officer selection officer. He sent me to officer candidate school to get my shoulder checked out because they thought it was my shoulder. Knocked out the pull-ups, and then they cleared me, and I was able to get in through the officer side of things in the Marine Corps. So that guy I'm still in touch with to this day. Captain Cracchiolo is probably a major or a lieutenant colonel by this point, but still hits me up, and he's just kind of the guy who got me through. And the rest is history. So it's just more of a insecurity and wanting a little bit more, that got me into it.
Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you did. There are so few of us that end up serving, and you obviously were an elite athlete going into it, and so it's not a surprise that you were looking at all of those elite, units. And I served around many of those groups for a long time. I did 7 years enlisted as a corpsman, and then I crossed over into the Army. Actually, I was going to get out and go to law school, and totally felt directed by God to go back in. And after watching Hotel Rwanda, a movie about the genocide in Rwanda, and I told my wife, I'm I haven't done enough. And so I went into the Army. A year later, I was in Iraq, and I was ooh, I'm doing enough. I'm doing enough.
Yeah.
But I ended up joining the special operations side in civil affairs and having my time in East Africa be my area of focus, and was in Rwanda, and was able to help the people there. And so it was just full circle, just an amazing, amazing journey. But I did the OCS route too, which was a great route for me to go, to get to that point. You know, Jared, you've had some unique experiences in the military that I think would be incredible if you would share some of those challenges and the challenging time in which you served as an officer.
Yeah. My challenges were during the COVID kind of time frame. Once I got through my initial training, going to officer candidate school, going to the basic school, so where they teach us to be infantry officers, and then we got our MOS, and I was able to get combat engineer, which was nice because the schoolhouse was in Camp Lejeune, which was where the wrestling team was located. So I ended up actually buying a house 10 minutes down the road from where the wrestling team was practicing. So it's just like I was getting myself positioned real closely.
Yep.
And there was a lot of hiccups. I ended up getting stationed at Cherry Point, which was like an hour north, base an hour north of there. So it's like I was commuting an hour back and forth from work, and so that ended up being a real bummer. But what ended up happening was, COVID hits, while I'm in the schoolhouse, and then there's all this talk of the wrestling team going away. And I've already started to wrestle with them. I've already started to make my connections, all this stuff. So it looked like it was going good. And then COVID just kind of like threw it all for a loop, right? So, and then they shut the team down with training. I had to start commuting up to Cherry Point for like almost 8 months. I was in that unit, but it was kind of cool because they were scheduled to deactivate. I was at the Marine Wing Squadron, and we were the MWSS 274. We ended up deactivating after we went to Yuma, Arizona for a training deployment. So I spent 3 months out in Yuma, Arizona, in the blistering heat in August. that was a wild experience. And, on the way back, when we got back from that, getting ready to deactivate the unit is when I met he's another like guardian angel. I met my to-be commanding officer, is a lieutenant colonel who was about to take over at 8th Engineer Support Battalion. I met him at a jiu-jitsu practice. So we got along really, really well because he's a wrestler. He's just this beast of a guy, and it just so happened that he was taking over command of a unit right there in Camp Lejeune. So he held my monitor. He got me orders to this new spot. He told me he would give me full range of motion to go wherever I wanted to go with the wrestling team. And I was like, sounds like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
But at that time, the vaccine mandates were starting to come down, and there's all this rumor and talk from everybody. It's like, oh, well, you might as well get it before they make it mandatory. They're going to make it mandatory. It's all this coercion, all this kind of like pushing it on you, and I was really frustrated. I was not having it. I was not having to wear a mask at the gym, not having to wear, I got in trouble so many times. And I had to be kind of careful while I talk about it, but just like to some extent, I understand it really affects people emotionally. But for me, as like someone who, I just feel like I have, my a right to my own breath, a right to, be as I am, and do no harm. I'm not not trying to hurt anybody, that type of thing. It's like I do what I would expect other people to do for me, right? So that kind of thing. So I just got a lot of resistance, and by the time I was the vaccine mandate was starting to become a thing, I had already prepared and I had all the paperwork ready to put in a religious accommodation. And so, I was on like Telegram groups, and I was talking to lieutenant colonels from the Air Force, that I met through Telegram, and just like, what do I do? Because they had put these things in for flu vaccine exemptions and stuff like that, so I got a lot of help, threw it in there. And then because I did that, they took me off my deployment because I didn't take the vaccine. I wasn't able to deploy overseas, and we were scheduled to build a school in Africa, a humanitarian mission and stuff like that. It's kind of a bummer because I trained up with my platoon. I was platoon commander and I trained up with them for 3 months in Bridgeport. We were doing mountain warfare training, and so it's like, we were ready to go, and they took me off, so that was really hard. But what ended up happening was I ended up getting taken over to battalion from the company, and they put me as the training officer. So I was, pretty high-ranking officer in the battalion. I could really tell anybody to do what I want, like anything, except stuff like that. And so kind of cool position, but it ended up being like a 9 to 5. It's like not a crazy workload or anything like that. So that's one thing about the Marine Corps and the military. You can make it a crazy workload. A lot of people would just busy themselves with busy work.
Right.
I didn't do that. I did the things I needed to do, and then I went and trained.
Me too. Yeah.
So it worked that way. And I ended up, because I got shifted over, and my battalion commander wasn't mad at me for not taking it. He understood me, and we were friends, and he never said anything to me publicly like that or anything, but we knew each other where we were at. It was unspoken. And so I would ask to go TAD for 2 weeks, to the Armed Forces Championship, I got on the Navy's wrestling team, so I wrestled for the Navy at the Armed Forces, and I won the freestyle, so it was like I was making the battalion look good, and at the time too, I ended up training our battalion in jiu-jitsu. I'd take them over to the McMap dojo, and so I was pretty active, and I was doing my own things. It was just extracurricular stuff. So I was like, still an active part of the battalion stuff. I didn't let it jade me so much, but it was just like being in that purgatory place where they were like waiting to see if I was going to get separated, and then after I think it was after 8 months after my religious accommodation was put in, they denied it. But then I submitted an appeal. So you get one appeal. And so then it took another 8 months for the appeal to get denied. And then once that was denied, I was like, oh, I'm getting kicked out, and my XO was telling me, he's like, yeah, you got a month to get this thing, and then we're going to start separating you. I was getting calls from chief warrant officers from the Pentagon to ask if it was true that I really wasn't vaccinated yet. I was like, yeah, we're about to brief the deputy commandant. Your name's going to get brought up. Okay, cool, man. Yeah, I'm still not. And then what ended up happening is that literally a week before that month was up, they dropped the mandate, and nothing happened ever. It's just like coercion. It's like sitting on the ground. So yeah, I made it through. I was able to, and good things happened out of it. I mean, I'm bummed I didn't get to go to Africa, but that deployment ended up being a logistical nightmare, and it would have been really stressful. And I ended up getting to go wrestle for the last year and a half for the Marine Corps, and then I because of that whole experience, I knew I wanted to get out. It was really hard on my marriage.
Oh, that stress. That stress would have been unbelievable. Just not knowing. I mean, how do you plan when it's so up in the air with a political agenda when the military is supposed to be apolitical?
Yeah, it was a wild ride. Yeah, MARSOC. I was putting in an application for assessment and selection, and they wouldn't even let me apply because I wasn't vaccinated.
They're called Raiders now, right?
Yeah.
I went through a lot of training with what I considered MARSOC guys at the time. Now are Raiders. Yeah, there's some cool dudes.
They really are. Yeah, two of my best friends from the Marine Corps were my neighbors, and it's because Stone Bay is where that was right down the road from where we lived. And that's where their battalions are, and yeah, they're really cool people. I've met some really cool Raiders. Really freaking cool.
They have a cool mission set too. One of the challenges with your story, Jared, is, and I've heard it from others that served during that time too, is it was an unjust order to take the vaccine. I work in a biopharma company today, and all of that mess was happening while I was working in one of those companies trying to produce stuff. And especially when we talk like Moderna, which is what I ended up taking, was so unproven, untested. And I get the flu 2 to 3 times a year, and it knocks me out for 2 weeks. I never used to get sick like that. And then they talk masks. I mean, I worked in the medical field for a long time, and now in the biopharma, and those masks that we were mandated to wear did nothing. So, in the end, I saw yesterday on social media, someone posted the letter from Joe Biden exonerating Fauci for any crimes he would have committed by forcing these untested vaccinations and mandating masks that didn't work. And it absolved him of all criminal charges. Why would a president need to do that unless there would have been criminal charges for their behavior and mandating and breaking the constitutional laws, Yeah,
it's really sad. It's one of those things where I just sit with it and I think like my entire life will like have this will be part of the story, and people will be dealing with this for a long time. So it's just very sobering, very, very sad,
Yep. So. Real quick, tell me what is it like to wrestle for a branch of the military like Navy or Marines? What's that experience like?
Yeah, we went out to Kitsap, base Kitsap in Washington near Seattle.
Yep, I know it.
Trained there for a month, and just like stayed on base and trained every day. It was like kind of my dream to get paid to be an athlete, getting paid as an officer, so it's really cool. It's a really cool month. And then Denzel Freeman, who was one of the other Marine officers on the team, he actually fights for the PFL, and he is on Team USA's Greco team. He's the number 3 guy on the Greco team, and so one of my best friends. And so we were, just training and everything, and then you wrestle the Air Force, and we ended up wrestling the Army in the finals, and I mean. Yeah, I was just in really good shape. I was the biggest I'd ever been. I had the best, the HIT instructors on base. The Marine Corps, they're civilians, but they're some of my best friends. Like, I still keep in touch with them on Instagram and phone, everything. And they just put us through a really good periodization training. And so I was just in really good shape going out there. And I ended up beating the Army's 88 kilogram guy, and he was a national champ in Division III. I was only ever a national qualifier. I mean, I went to nationals with the torn pec, but and I was beating a lot of guys that were all Americans, but I was kind of in that all American range, not a national champ. And this guy was kind of a legend, and I didn't really know much about him, but I had friends from college that were like, "Dude, you beat him?" And I was like, yeah, so it's like, I don't know, the longer you stick with it and the more the consistent you stay, like I'm gaining on the people that I never thought were attainable, and I'm like, I've just made little, so I've noticed like it is the small baby steps that just kind of like, it's just don't quit. If you love it, don't quit. Just keep doing it. And so it's, but yeah, overall that whole thing, winning the Armed Forces Championships, we had like a big kind of like, celebration after with all the branches. We're hanging out with all the teams and stuff, and so we had a lot of fun.
Awesome.
It was really cool. Yeah.
I'm going to capitalize on the message you just said. Little steps, continuous steps forward will help someone reach their goal. Nothing about your journey says that it's easy. It's a lot of sweat, a lot of effort, but that's the only way you get to the level of where you're at as a professional athlete, getting it done. I love that. Jared, thanks so much for coming on today and sharing your story. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience today before we close out?
Yeah, a few small things. Well, for starters, anybody can hit me up on Instagram. So it's Fekete JJ. So please, tell me your stories or anything like that. I'd love to hear from you. The other thing is I'm going to a jiu-jitsu camp for veterans and law enforcement in Tulum for my buddy Flow State BJJ. We do like microdosing mushrooms and holotropic breath work. We do sweat lodge. It's just a really good dipping your toes into ceremony and what ceremony really is in the sacred space and setting intentions and stuff like that. And that's what really got me into sort of the idea that I wanted to pursue plant medicines. So that's kind of another alternative route for people who maybe are just so fed up with the medical industrial system and just so fed up with like normal ways of healing, or like maybe the status quo. So that's kind of where, you know, my work is starting to like head in, is just working with the plant medicines, getting people connected to the right resources, but also jujitsu, healing through jujitsu and stuff like that too. So yeah, I have info for that, or whoever wants it. So
Perfect. Well, thanks, brother. I appreciate you being on today and sharing your story and being vulnerable. We've talked about some important elements. I hope people have taken some notes like I did. I took a whole page. And congratulations on your success that you're finding today. If you're ever in Salt Lake doing a fight, dude, I'd love to be down there and support you in person. So
sounds good, brother. Yeah, we'll do.
And if there's ever a time when you need somebody, feel free to reach out. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. You have a brother in me.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, man.
All right, brother. Take care.
Peace.